going on, everybody? It's me. It's time for another history, or whatever this show is. Anyway, it's time for this, and I thought in this episode we'd talk about Mew. I have talked about him in the past. I've told a few stories, but I wanted to get more, in depth, that kind of thing. You know, do a whole whatever this is on that. So, I met him because his family was, friends with another part of our family, and in some roundabout circumstance, I was supposed to, I got roped into helping them move the first time, because this happened multiple times. And that was the first time I met him. It was supposed to be myself, and I think his brother, and him, who were to help load up everything that was in their house into a just this big moving truck so they could move. But of course, that was also around the time that I was introduced to the fact that, one, Mew does not bathe, maybe once a month. And two, he is also one of the laziest people I've ever met. Because he did not want to move anything. He kept just he'd move 2 boxes and then have to have a break for 45 minutes. In which he would just mess around on his phone, or, just have to go check on the computer, or just anything to keep from having to actually, do work. And so very little got done. I know, you're surprised. Totally. And from there, I had not heard from him in a very, very long time. And I'd have to say, maybe a couple of years. And somehow or another, we got in contact again, and I guess that I had forgotten kind of who he was, and so he was just like, oh yeah, we should totally hang out, and I was like, oh, okay, sure. And as soon as I saw him again, it all clicked back into place, and oh. But I also didn't have a lot of friends, because this was around the time that I had moved, to where I am now. And it's, depression coupled with the fact that you don't have a lot of friends, you tend to befriend very strange, often not the best people. So, that is what happened. And we started hanging out a little bit. This would be after I had known a couple of others, but we started hanging out from time to time. A lot of times, he would need me to either bring him somewhere or to do something, because when we first started hanging out, it was alright. It was just kind of it was fine as long as I didn't have to go into his, beard lair. Because, the smell. But other than that, it was okay. And as long as you were, not downwind. And he was one of those people that shares way too much and has all these stories. I think I referred to him once in a video as kind of he's a one-upper. Anything you've done, he's done better and then some. And he always has a story about it. And it's always a very long story. So if you were just hey, I went to the store and I saw this crazy guy. He's oh, well, one time I went to this store and it was this big store and I saw this guy. Oh, he was so weird and all kinds of crazy stuff. And it was always like that. No matter what your story was, he had 1,000 times more interesting of an experience and had to tell you about it. And a lot of times it was bullshit. A lot of times he just made all this stuff up. Especially whenever it came to, went to this concert or something, and he would talk about how great he knew, met all these people and all this other stuff, but it was bro, you don't leave your house. Since when did you do that? So, that was kind of my introduction with him. It was a lot of, I don't really know, it was a lot of, really weird, I guess we were friends because... But what I can tell you is him compared to several of the other neckbeards I know, he was absolutely the one that fits the physical description more than anything. A lot of the other neckbeards I knew didn't necessarily fit in the whole, like, description. I don't know, the stereotype. I'm not really sure the best way to describe it. Mew 100% did, save for very small details. So, he absolutely would strike me as the kind of guy who would wear a fedora if he, would attract the ladies and that kind of thing. But that was before the fedora thing was a thing. But if it was a thing, yeah, no, he would have. I absolutely believe that. So, Mew was a very large individual, and I don't mean in the tall sense. He usually only wore those leather mandals that you would find at, like, Walmart. They're always cargo shorts. Always cargo shorts, or just old jeans and t-shirts that at least had one hole in them, and they were always stained with something. All of his clothes were always stained with something. And that's because, I mentioned before, he only bathed once a month. He also would very rarely ever change his clothes. And I don't mean like, oh, I'm just going to put the same thing on. Like, no, he would put on an outfit and wear that all day, every day, even to sleep in, for at least a week. I had no idea what to make of that, because I'm still pretty young at this point. I'm like barely in my 20s, and I'm just like, okay, I guess he's just like a really weird, gross dude. I don't know what that means. But yeah, he would do that. He was also the one who was like super obsessed with that MMO game, MU, which is where his name came from. And he would play that for just hours and hours and hours and hours at a time. Like, I remember one time we were supposed to go, like I was supposed to bring him because he was trying to get a job. Mainly because his parents were trying to make him get a job. And he didn't want to get up, like, to go to this interview. Like, because he was supposed to be there around, like, 9. But he didn't have a vehicle. At the time, his car was all kind of messed up. So I was like, okay, well, I'll bring you. I'm a friend. We can do this. So I went there, and he would not, like, get up. And it was because he had only gone to bed an hour and a half before. And it was because the last time I had seen him was like 6:30 the day before. 6, it was like, I say 6, but that's like, because right now I'm thinking that's when the sun goes down. I don't really actually know if that was the proper time. I'm just associating. Either way, it was like late afternoon. And I was like, all right, man, I'm going to be here tomorrow. I'll see you then. Make sure you get some rest and all that good shit. No, he stayed up all night playing video games. Just video games and smoking. I feel like I really do need to point this out, because I don't know how many of you actually kind of put this into full perspective. Mew, when compared to myself and my friends, like, even my Neckbeard friends, we were all roughly the same age, except for Mew, who was like 10 years older than all of us. And yeah, so when I was like 22, dude was like in his 30s. And that was just the kind of guy he was. He was like this weird dude that just kind of hung around us. And he just didn't bathe. And he would make, like, really awkward jokes, like, these really horribly sexist jokes that would make everybody kind of like, okay, dude, whatever you say. And, yeah, it was a lot of cringe. It was a lot of, like, okay, this is weird. But the weirdest part was not just his ability to, go a month or so without bathing. The weirdest part was the fact that this man at one point did actually have a functional relationship. And then something happened, and that ended. But for some reason, he and the ex-girlfriend both still lived in his parents' house, just in separate rooms. Which I did not know how to. I was just like, that's okay. That's weird, but all right. And then one day she moved out, and that was it. So, yeah, for the longest time, he just kind of lived in the same house with his ex, and they didn't like each other. It wasn't one of those things where it's like, well, we broke up and we're still friends. Like, no, they didn't like each other. This was how they were doing things. And now, the house that they lived in had, let me see, 3 bedrooms and a utility room. So the master bedroom was at one side of the house. It was like this kind of just long, that's the best way to describe it. It was like a big rectangle, and then it was kind of divided into things. So the master bedroom's on one side of the house, and then there's all these, this huge den, kitchen, was supposed to be a dining room, and all this other stuff, and that's where the old suffering bastard computer was. And then on the other end were the other 2 bedrooms and this utility room. And then, there's like a bathroom and all that good stuff. So, Muse, how can I put this? Muse hoard his neckbeard nest, which was not entirely his fault. His parents were also big-time hoarders, so he came by that trait very naturally. But he was in this one room, and the nest had grown so expansive that instead of getting rid of the trash and cleaning up the room, he just moved into the next bedroom and then started over again and just kept going from there. And then eventually that room too became so overcrowded that he just moved everything into this utility room, which was now empty. And then that was his room, which was like 3 times smaller than either one of the bedrooms. But somehow, yes, that was his thing. I have no idea why he handled it like this, but that was okay, I guess that's just the way he do. And, I thought that maybe his parents would have a problem with that, but no, they were just like, yeah, that's fine. And that's just kind of how he kept doing what he did. And at one point, to add to this horrific miasma of filth that he had created, I want to say, got or adopted, but the best way to put it is he just somehow acquired a cat. There was just a cat one day. I don't know where it came from. It lived in his room, and if your thought process is going exactly where mine is going, this was a male cat who come on, do you really think he cleaned out the litter box? After the horde situation I just described to you, do you really think he did? Because the answer is no. He may have started in the beginning doing that, but it eventually just devolved into no. And so there was always just a horrible odor compounding. It just kept growing. So, we have this man who does not bathe, his piles of God knows how old dirty laundry, food containers that are not being cleaned up, and now a cat box. So it just keeps getting better. And yeah, that was his living situation. That was what he did. He was one of the, I've seen this on the subreddit, the Neckbeard Nest subreddit, which is an interesting one. There's always like horrific hordes and things to see. That's where I get some images for my videos too, if you haven't already noticed. But there's also this phenomenon that they describe as the mobile nest, which is someone whose car is so nasty that it counts as a neckbeard nest. And Mew had both. He had both the nest, then a second nest, then a third, and a mobile nest. This man had just like junk everywhere. I have never seen so much trash. I've never witnessed so much garbage spread out like that. And he was okay with it. He was just perfectly fine. Like, this is just, this is how he does things, and that is just the way it is. And it was honestly kind of horrific. So yeah, that was just how he lived. And now, the things about, like, his personality and the things that he got in trouble for are... I mean, I've explained them in more detail in certain other stories, but yes, at one point, more than one point from what I found out, one of his favorite things to do was hit on underage girls. I didn't know about that until the one time I witnessed it, but apparently it happened a lot. I had no idea, to be completely honest with you, and I don't know if that's better or worse, because that's horrifying and disgusting. He also would... I have no idea... Like, at one point he worked at a pizza place, and that was a weird story that actually does get kind of interesting. So, because I ended up working at the same place. So he got hired to work at as a delivery driver at Domino's. And the Domino's we had in this town was one of those that was, like, built into a gas station. So it wasn't like its own building, it wasn't like a whole thing. But he got hired there and worked there about 6 months, and then Hurricane Katrina happened. And this area didn't flood, but we got a shitload of wind damage. And apparently the manager... Oh, excuse me. Apparently the manager and assistant manager were trying to inform Domino's corporate about how, hey man, this is like a Cat 5. It's going to be really, really bad. And corporate was just like, no, we've done big storms like this before. It's fine. Just leave everything there and just shut it off and it'll be fine. And by leave everything there, they mean leave everything that's in the freezer in the freezer. Spoiler alert, it wasn't fine. That building and this entire area was out of electricity of any kind for almost 2.5 weeks. And it's summer. The way Mew described it to me later was... because I was not there to witness this, and he's like, but he had to go with his manager and his assistant manager because he was one of the only people who stayed. A lot of the other drivers and workers left the state because this is a big ass storm, and they were just like, no, I'm out. And a lot of them just didn't come back. So he went with them, and he described it as, we opened the door, like the actual just door to the back, like the back entry to the store, not even the freezer, just the door, and you could smell it already. You could just smell something awful was going on. And he was just like, oh, okay. And his manager was like, alright, prop open that door with a brick, because the back door for the employees automatically shut. And he's like, do not fucking close that door, because I only imagine that when we open this thing, it's gonna get worse. And it did. It did. Again, this is a man who's used to terrible smells, but the way he described it was not just a horrible odor, it was like being physically assaulted with a horrible odor. It was like someone had managed to take the smell of just all the worst things you can think of, manifest it into a physical object, and then hit you with it. It was overwhelming. And he was like, we didn't even look in the freezer. We just opened it, the smell hit us, and we just had to go back out. It was like, I'm going to throw up. This is disgusting. And so they let it air out for a while. And they had to call the owners of the gas station itself to get the keys to the rest of the doors, because that Domino's, like I said, it was an add-on. So the front, where the register and everything didn't seal. It was just, it was just there. They would just lock up. So they had to get the gas station guys to come by so they could unlock the rest of the doors to get the smell out. And eventually they did, and they just they had all the doors open, even the loading doors in the back for trucks to bring in stuff, just everything open, and it was like the power had already come back on at this point. So we just had fans from everything going, like sucking the air out of this place, and eventually it was enough that they could go in, like, into the store. But Mew said that like he still could not go into that freezer without tying a bandana around his face in order to keep the smell out, and he's like, and that only partially worked because it was bad. It was real bad. And he's like, I looked in that door. I don't think I've ever seen that much mold in my life. Like, it was, because pizza dough is kept on these trays, and then they just keep it in there, and it's kept cold. So when they need it, they take it out, make it into your pizza, and your ingredients and everything is also in there. They're all bad. All bad. And Domino's corporate does this thing where the trays, depending on like the size and the type, I guess, of crust, they're color coded. So it's like, red is small, white is medium, and blue is large, or whatever. And they usually, like, if you run out, you just move, like, the tray is now empty, move it to a different place, and when the trucks, like, the delivery guys come by, they can come in and, like, count out your trays and be like, you need this much of this much of that, and then they just bring the trays back to, like, wherever they make all this stuff, and then they clean them and reuse them, because they're big plastic bins. And they were just like, this is awful, so they called, I guess whoever was their representative at, like, corporate, and they're like, well, we're gonna have to send somebody out there to look at this because it's a thing. And they're like, all right. And Mew said, like, a day later, this dude shows up, and he's from corporate, and he like just they told him, like, it smells awful, and he puts on the little paper mask thing that everybody's wearing now, I guess. And he leaned in that door and just looked at everything, and it was like, okay. And then he came back out, and he called, called whoever the franchise owner was, or corporate, or whatever, and was like, no, they need to throw it all away. And they're looking at they're like, okay, so can they, like, get us the trays? And he's like, no, the trays are contaminated. They need to be thrown away as well. Like, everything. We're talking like an entire liquidation. However much you guys invested to be in that freezer, it's gone. It is gone. And so they did. They had to dump everything. And they were just like, yeah, it was awful. But the thing about it was, because it was mold, and you said the plus is, that mold is not something on his pay grade. So Domino's actually had to hire some people come in, take all that out, and clean everything. So on the plus side, I didn't have to carry anything. So, I didn't have to deal with it. I had to witness it. I had to smell it. At least I didn't have to pick it up. So, hey, that's a win. But yeah, like, after that, maybe a day or so after that, he called the manager, because now at this point, like, the guys are supposed to be, like, cleaning and everything, and he was just like, okay, so what's the plan? Well, did they tell you what our plan is, what all this is? And his assistant manager, that's who he called first, because she was in charge of, like, personnel, and was like, yeah, I'm in Houston? And he was like, wait, what? It's like, yeah, I'm not coming back. I went to live with family in Texas, and I am absolutely not coming back. You're going to have to call the manager. You're going to have to call, like, whoever's in charge. And he's like, oh, okay. So then he called the manager, and he was like, yeah, I know I was there the other day to check that out, and I looked at it, and I decided, I'm going to go to Kentucky with my brother, so, congratulations, you're the manager now. So, he just kind of, like, was like, okay, what the fuck? And he had to get in touch with their franchise runner, with whoever was in charge of their account at Domino's, and be like, hey, they're gone. Like, they just left. And the guy was like, what? And he's like, yeah, they're just, like, not here anymore. And he was like, so how many employees are in the store? He's like, just me. It's just me now. Everybody else is gone. And he was like, okay, well, I guess you'll be in charge. And he did. He just kind of, like, fell into being the manager of a Domino's, which is really funny when you think about it. Like, he just accidentally became, like, in charge. And he was like, well, we're not doing delivery because obviously we can't. I would have to leave the store to do that, and you can't just do that. So it was all pickup. And because he was the only one there and he was in charge of everything, he filled out all the paperwork and did everything. And at one point, I'll never forget this because he told me about how, like, yeah, I guess I'm the manager now. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And like 2 weeks later, he gives me a phone call. And I was just like, Moonhorse, what are you doing? And I was like, nothing. And he's like, this is super weird, but can you help me? And I was like, do what? And he's like, with the store. I was like, bro, I don't work there. He goes, no, I mean, like, you can't, but I'll pay you on the table if you help me make pizzas. And I was like, can I eat some of the pizzas? And he's like, yeah, absolutely. It's a fucking deal. So, working unofficially at a pizza place was one of my favorite jobs. We had, like, all these rules, and I followed the rules. I wasn't, like, unsanitary or anything, and weirdly enough, so was Mew. Mew was actually, like, shockingly sanitary and serious about his job when he actually had one. And so he, like, really went about it right, but he was like, so there's a secret about how we have to do certain things. And I was like, okay. And he's like, so sanitation rules state that whenever you work here, you are incapable of giving the pizza or selling the pizza to anyone if a person has touched the pizza, even if your hands are clean. That's just against the rules. You can't do that ever. So, that being said, because he had already put, like, this big stuffed crust pepperoni thing in the big ass oven, he's like, so that being said, I'm gonna take this out of the oven, and this is gonna sit on the counter. And I was like, okay. And he's like, we don't have an order for it yet, but I'm going to go around front because I have to check the register. Don't touch the pizza. Okay. I get where you're going with this. So basically the way we got around it is you'd make a pizza and then one of you would accidentally poke it and be like, oh no, we can't sell that. I guess we'll have to get rid of it. And then we just eat it. So that was a great job. That was fantastic. We would just fuck around in the store all day. That was the closest I ever came to, like, having an actual living embodiment of the movie Clerks, where it was just like fuck around in the store all day. And we both hated working there. Like, he hated being in charge because, like, it was always stupid shit. Like, people would call and, like, there were all these huge signs everywhere saying that it was takeout only. Only takeout. You cannot have a delivery, no delivery. And every day, invariably, every single day, someone would call and be like, you guys do delivery? And he'd be like, no, man, we don't do delivery. Oh, fuck you! And then they'd hang up on him, and it would happen every fucking day. And eventually he was just like, I don't want to fucking work here anymore. This sucks. Like, I get it. We get free food, and I'm in charge, so I can just show up whenever I wanted. But I don't want to work here anymore. And I was like, okay, so are you going to quit? And he's like, yeah, I was gonna, but if I do, I don't get to draw on employment. So I think I'm just going to try to get fired. Which is why we started fucking around. And, to his credit, it lasted almost a year before he got fired. So, yeah, he got away with a lot of shit. We did. It was a fun time. It was a lot of fun. Despite the fact that we did have, like, I don't really talk to him anymore because he moved, like, way the hell out of, I think, on the other side of New Orleans somewhere. I don't know. But, yeah, even though he was gross and he got into a lot of arguments with the other Neckbeard, like, guys I knew, that was, like, one of, honestly, the best times we ever had, was fucking around in this store that we totally should not have been in charge of, because we're just two, like, absolute jackasses, and it was fucking hilarious. I would have to help him, and I remember one time specifically, specifically because he was trying to get fired, I had to help him with something, and I'm trying to get this thing done while he's working the register. Like, I'm trying to help cook this like I think cinnamon bread or some kind of nonsense that was coming through the oven, and I like leaned over and was just like, not where any of the customers could see me, but just like far enough out, and I was like, "Where does it go?" And he was like, "Oh, the box," and like gestured to the box, and for some reason, the guy he was talking to just goes, "Who's that?" Like he knew me, like he didn't know me, but he was just like, "Who that?" And and Mew just looks him dead in the face and just goes, "That's the pizza gremlin." Oh my god, the guy was just like, "No, for real," and he goes, "That's who he is. That's all we know him by." It's like, oh my god. But anyway, that's the end of this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Not all neckbeards are horrible, I guess. You can have good times with people as long as they're your friends, but yeah, I kind of wanted to do this little crazy series to talk about, sometimes they're alright, Sometimes they're alright. They're obviously bad times, but sometimes there are good times. And there had to be some good times. I mean, we were friends. So, but with that being said, thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed this, please like, comment, and subscribe. If you'd like to support this show, or this channel, or whatever the hell it is I'm doing, I have a merch store, and I have a Ko-Fi. And yeah, that's it, actually. I always think there's like a third thing, but there really isn't. And I always do that. But thanks for watching, everybody, and I'll see you in the next episode. I love you all. Goodbye!